A one, a two, a one, a two, a three. Nice. Cool. Rob, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, great to be here always.
We always have great fun playing music together and talking too, but great fun playing music. Looking over here to see if my computer's still going. It's going.
It's going?
Good.
It's good.
What we're going to do in this segment is Rob requested that if I would simply answer some questions he asked that he thought might be interesting, the conversation for people, bass players to know about. So here we go. Rob, you're in charge. Talk to me.
Well, the topic that I was interested in is just some of your background teaching, and I had some things that I don't think, even though we've done so much stuff over the years, that I've even heard answered. So the first one was, what was your first teaching that you ever did?
That I taught?
Yeah.
My father drove log truck in Oregon 6 days a week and played music 6 and 7 nights a week. And whenever his health wouldn't allow him to drive log truck anymore, he started a little music store. And he was a very good musician, country western player. And he ended up with like 60 and 70 students almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
And I'd started playing guitar about that exact same time when I was 12, 13. And within about 6 months, he said, "Hey, Jimmy, you want to make some money?" So he started having me sit in and watch his students, watch him teach them half-hour lessons. And that was, what year would that have been? Maybe 1967? And after about 4 or 5 of me watching, he said, "Here, you teach one, Jimmy." Excuse me. He said, "Just do what I did." So I was 13 years old. I started teaching guitar.
Oh, wow.
Every once in a while a bass student, but mostly guitar.
So did you teach the same thing that he did?
100%. I modeled my teaching exactly after his.
Oh, that's interesting. So what were you teaching? Like what
Sure.
type of thing were you did
chords, country guitar. I call them cowboy chords, G, C, and D. And he would sing, and he'd sing, "Please release me, let me go, chick-a-boom, chick-a-boom, chick." 4 chord, and it'd be G, C, and D. And so I would just teach him those chords, and I couldn't sing, but I'd pretend, and we'd just play it over and over and over, and that was it. Basically, he was teaching people how to play 1, 4, 5 chords so they could sing and play with their friends and family. And most of the music they were playing was country.
So you'd teach them the basics to get going and some songs.
That's it. Teach them chords, and then excuse me. And then he'd of course come in and he'd say, "Hey, I'll come and work with you now." And he'd sing a song, and he'd say, "Jimmy, play lead." And I'm like, "What?" Well, I'd just sort of make up stuff. And after one lesson, he'd say, "Here, listen to this record." And he'd give me a Merle Haggard record, and it would be a song, a little 45 that he had just sang. And he said, "Copy that guitar lead in there." So I'd copy the guitar solo, transcribe.
Yeah,
so the next day or that afternoon, he'd say, "Let's do that song again." He'd sing it, and the student would whack along with it, and I'd play the guitar solo.
Wow, so you were doing transcription right from the beginning.
100%.
Wow.
I started working gigs with him immediately. I mean, just 2 weeks later, he'd say, "Go on a gig," and he'd say, "Here, learn these 3 songs. We're going to do those tonight." And he'd give 3 45s. One might be by Buck Owens, and one might be by Merle Haggard, and the other might be by Charlie Pride. And I would listen to him and figure out, what are those chords? And they were, again, just 1, 4, 5. Sometimes he'd be sitting in the back of the room, hear me do it, and he'd say, "Now that's a minor chord. You got to learn what an A minor is." So I'd figure it out, and he'd yell and show it to me. So yeah, I learned the songs to go play them on his gigs. And again, we would do them once, and he'd say, "Now I want you to learn that lead on that one for tomorrow. We're going to play that again tomorrow." Then very quickly too, he said, "Let's do some bass." He said, "Now you know those chords you learned? I just want you to play the roots to them bass." So I'd go. He'd say, "How about making it more interesting? Give me a root and fifth. Learn a little walk between." So I go. Sure. And then as I would do that, I would hear on the records, well, that's what those guys in the records are doing. So yeah, that was how I learned. And those are the things I taught.
Wow. So what about after that? What was the next instruction that you had?
Well, there was this band, a local band called American Frog, and they played in the big city, Roseburg, Oregon. I lived out in the woods in a little town of about 400 people. Roseburg was a metropolis of, I don't know, probably 5,000 people. It was sort of a joke. But I'd go over there and watch these guys play, and they were bona fide, straight-ahead rock stuff. They were doing, just the tunes of the day. But they were a little bit sophisticated in the sense that the drummer would play flute, the lead guitar player sang very well, but he would also play a couple of different instruments. I sort of didn't understand what they were. I'm not sure what they were really. But the other guitar player named Gary, he would play a big fat jazz box, and he would play sort of like bebop lines in these songs. And I'm like, what is that? So I watched that band play 8 or 10 times and just freaking loved it. I'd ask my dad, and he'd say, I don't know what they're doing. Go ask that guy Gary you like. So lo and behold, I went to a music store in Roseburg, and there was I saw this guy after one of his concerts, and I said, man, do you teach guitar? He said, yeah, at Ricketts Music. I went over there, and there he was. And I said, what should I do? And he said, well, you don't need to take a lesson. Just use these books. And I bought the jazz, what's it called? It's by Mickey Baker, and it's called Jazz Guitar.
Oh,
and that was my instruction. I learned that. And then he said, here, also learn this for some technique. And it was a little bitty book, kind of like a pamphlet. And it was Andre Segovia. Scales.
Wow.
Yeah, Andre Segovia, for those of you who don't know, was the classical virtuoso for many, many years. And it was just scales and arpeggios and fingering. So I learned how to go. I learned how to do it on guitar, mostly at that time. Bass, I was just sort of thumping along. But that was my next instruction, working with those 2 books.
Wow. So did that work? Like for him to just say, go do these, and
it worked.
And with no more instruction than that?
It worked in the sense that I just learned the stuff out of those books. Mm-hmm. The Mickey Baker jazz guitar book, that was very complicated. Major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, major 6, minor 7, flat 5. And I would just look at the little charts and play the little exercises. And interesting enough is very quickly, in a few of the more sophisticated country songs, I would play with my dad, and I'd learn how to stick one of the chords in. He'd go, whoa, what's that? Show me that. What chord is that? He knew a few of them. But every once in a while he'd go, whoa, that's a nice one, man. Let me learn that one there. So, yeah, it worked because I just worked the freaking books. I just played them over and over and over and over. See, for me, when I used to get a book, and I still feel like it should be that way, when I get a book, I devour the thing, man. I don't try it out. No, I spend hundreds of hours on each freaking exercise and master it. I was learning those Mickey Baker things and transposing them.
Wow.
I was going, I think I'll just do that up a half step. I think I'll do that up a whole step. Sure, so it worked.
Wow, that's interesting. So what were those teaching experiences like from those teachers? Did that help you as far as teaching, or was it later that you got teachers that were really influential?
It was much later that I changed my teaching. When I was teaching as a youngster, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, I was just teaching basically country, but I would teach a few guys some of this jazz stuff I'd figured out. And there was one student that came in who knew scales like crazy, so him and I would play scales, and he actually taught me the cycle of fourth. He said, yeah, man, we want to do it like this, and then count up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to do it like this. And him and I would play. Wow. I would play major scales, and he'd harmonize it. And I'm like, it didn't sink in like this is something I should do forever. It was just cool. So no, it wasn't really. It was many, many, many years later until I found a teacher or saw people teach that I wanted to emulate and imitate.
But those foundational things, I mean, those are all through the base workout, those scale things. That's really interesting.
A lot of stuff, I didn't realize it till many years later. A lot of things that I teach, what I teach and how I teach it is exactly what I learned from my dad when I was a teenager.
Wow, that's interesting. So when did you have, when did you get to teachers that really influenced you in a new way that affected your teaching? Who were those?
Well, to start with, when
teachers?
I went to college, I took lessons from a double bass teacher and an electric bass teacher. I never had any bass lessons. I had transcribed a bunch of bass lines by that time, and also I was doing rock songs, Creedence Clearwater and Grateful Dead and Jimi Hendrix. I was learning those on guitar and bass by this time, and I'd gotten into funk. I didn't know what jazz was, but I'd been copying funk lines. Again, just listening to the records and copying them. But when I went to college, I had lessons from a few teachers. Like I said, for a year on double bass one, for a year and a half from another teacher. And I didn't learn anything from those people. I just sort of did what they told me, but it didn't make sense.
Was it was it because of the teaching or the material, or why didn't that work?
Bad teaching.
Bad teaching.
Yeah. I've since learned what good teaching and bad teaching is. And, they just didn't know how to teach. I've met this all of my life. Some players who could play really well and couldn't begin to teach. Some of that, I believe, was because the things that they could do, they just sort of came easily for them. Then I met some teachers who were very technical and they could explain things and expected you to do this and this and this, but they really couldn't play well. And I'm going, but this doesn't sound good.
So the combination of those two things, of being able to play it and teach it, it was kind of early on. You had people that could play it and tell you about whatever it was, but then ran into that. What about beyond that? What were the great teachers that you had at some point?
Not very many.
Not very many?
The first really serious, what I called good teaching, was a bass player in Seattle named James Harnett. He was a principal bass player of the Seattle Symphony, and I specifically moved to Seattle to study bass with him. I had met Rufus Reed, and he said, if you really want to play the double bass, you got to study with a serious teacher. So I moved to Seattle. James Harnett was an outstanding player and a good teacher. And interesting enough, too, after about a year's worth of lessons, he said, I think you need to take lessons from my stand partner in the symphony, Ronald Simon. Harnett recognized that some of the things I couldn't do, he just wasn't that good at teaching them. And that was fundamentals. Ron Simon was the first teacher I studied with who said, put your finger here. No, bend the finger that way. Play it here. No, you played it too fast. Slow it down. Now I want you to play it with these fingers here. He physically worked on my technique on the double bass, how to hold the instrument, how to play good technique. And it was out of the Nanny book, which is a fundamental classical technique book. And I remember a couple of times, one time specifically, he said, are you going to play the double bass or just screw around with it? I know you're an electric bass player, but when are you just going to give in and work on the right technique? And I sort of went, because I was, quote, a hot shit. I was having gigs and everything. So he was the first teacher that really made me play good technique. And
it kind of busted your chops a little bit, too.
Big time.
Yeah, huh.
Every lesson. And after about, I'd say maybe 9 months worth of lessons from me, and he said, now I think you ought to go back and study with Mr. Harnett again. And I did. And I could now understand and grasp a bunch of things he was playing and showing me because I had developed fundamental technique.
Wow. So was that why was it James? Is that why he sent you there?
Yes.
Was to kind of fill in some...
Correct. Harnett was a real sort of an interesting thinker up here. And he had a hard time with some of the mechanical stuff, sort of thinking it here. And again, I think he was that kind of player that things maybe came a little more natural for him. So he did a lot of the stuff and learned to play at a real high level without understanding what he had to go through to do that. And Harnett and Ron Simon was the opposite. His fundamentals were like a rock, man. He knew exactly what to do and how to do it. And again, some people just analyze better and teach better.
So what did you learn from those two situations that you took for your teaching from that? Because I'm hearing a couple of things that sound very fundamental that I know you do.
I've always described good teaching as a combination of three things: what the student wants to learn, what the teacher wants the student to learn, and what the student can actually handle. And that's the most important, was because most students, they think they can play all sorts of cool stuff that they aren't ready for yet. So over time, after studying with those guys, I started to realize, well, I need to be able to recognize the deficiencies in a student. I need to be able to recognize those things that he needs to work on to get to this level, and he has no idea. He just got his eyes on this level. At the same time, I need to be able to play and teach, illustrate, and show things that are real high level in their performance ability, or not ability, but presentation ability, their musicality, dynamics, articulation, phrasing, things like that, which Harnett was just a beautiful player, a master of that. So I started to recognize that whole gamut, that there's a big array of things that go into good teaching, not just do this page.
Did he discuss all that sort of stuff with like something you were playing, or did you?
Ron Simon talked about it. And when I went back to Harnett, he said, so let's play this here. And he would say, now notice how I phrase this. And before I probably would have gone, what's a phrase? But now I started to recognize it. And also he said, that looks good. Try this fingering. And I could try a fingering because I could already do. See, you can't just say, here's 9 fingerings. Well, we have to have something we can already do to build on. So he could build on that. You bet. And again, many teachers fall into that bad, or they miss that third one, and that is what the student can actually handle and they just give the students stuff that's way over their heads.
Yeah.
I find that teachers do two things a lot. Excuse me. They underestimate the student, and they give the student just dumb, simple things that the student's bored with. And they can basically either already do or they can learn to do like that. And then the teacher also overestimates the students, and they give them stuff that sounds incredible, but the student can't begin to play it. And if he does, it sounds terrible. He has no idea what he's doing or how to finger or how to, so it's challenging.
Yeah, and I think, one of the many things that you do in your teaching is the vision that you have of what a student might be capable of that they can't see. So it's like another ingredient there that of seeing, what you could do in 6 months, which could be way beyond what the student even imagines he's capable of. But you have that ability to see that too, which rather than a deficiency, something that you're like, look, if you work your tail off, you can do this.
That I feel like is the value, the Jim Stinnett part of my teaching, and that is I'm a good observer, and I can envision and see we go through this, and we're going to be here. And most students can't see that at all. Now, the challenge with students is they have a hard time doing those things because they can't see that it's going to be this.
Yeah.
That's fine. It takes trust. It takes dedication and trust to do things that your teacher says to do, whether you can see that it's good or not.
Now, were they, in terms of being like tough on you as a teacher to student, did you already have that ability to like really lay the law down as a teacher before that?
Sure.
Or
no, that came from my upbringing as a person and musically from my dad.
Yeah.
If he'd show me the chord and we'd practice it for 10 minutes, when we got ready to play the song, then if I did it wrong, he'd yell at me, "G, get that C chord. What are you doing?" So stay in a groove. I'm like, no, man. I've often told people, good music is not casual, in my opinion. It's called freedom through discipline. Sure.
So there was always a seriousness about getting the stuff right,
totally.
Learning and doing things correctly and getting there.
Yeah.
Any other teachers that you had after that that were
I had
noteworthy?
a couple of different teachers that were pretty good, but the big influence, the one that influenced my entire life forever, how I teach and play and think, was John Laporta. John Laporta could do all of those things we just talked about. He could watch students and see what they needed to work on. He could watch them and understand that he could pick out the things that they couldn't. I remember hearing Larry Monroe talk about his first saxophone lesson with John. And he went in playing bebop and doing all this incredible shit. And he thought he was impressing him. And finally he stopped and John said, "Can you play me a C major scale real slow?" And Larry did it and stopped. And John said, "You really don't move from one note to the next one well." And Larry said, "I had just played all this incredible bebop. And John didn't like me going." He didn't like that. And he said, "It took me a few years of disciplined practice to realize that he was 100% right, and I just wasn't able to hear that." Well, I used to hear that, and I used to get that same thing with Ed Barker. Ed Barker's a principal bassist of the Boston Symphony. When I started taking from him, oh my God, I was at the level now. I was already an adult, so I could appreciate it. And I would simply say, "Ed, play that again, would you?" And he'd sort of look at me like, "Play my thing for me." And he would demonstrate, and I would analyze his playing with all these parameters I'd learned. And I went, "Oh my God, look at that, listen to that, see that, understand that." And Ed was an incredible good teacher. Not only was he diligent and told me what to do, but as an example of just perfection, basically. Really, really fine musician and player.
Now, didn't he have the ability to play the classical pieces in different keys by memory?
Of course he did.
Yeah.
James Harnett was the first person I saw do that. He would go, beep, and he'd go, "I don't know about that fingering." He'd try it again. He'd go, "Let's try it up a half step and see if that fingering works." And he'd do it and be like,
"Wow."
What? And Ed Barker could do the same thing. Anything he could play, solo, excerpt, whatever, he could just play them in all keys and thumb position with different fingerings on different strings. Sure. And I recognized from that, mastery of the instrument. I used to see people do that, but I didn't know. They just played like, wow. And like many people, I used to go, "Whoa, it's magic. Yeah. Look how easy they make it look. They're so talented. They're so gifted." Well, they're all of that. But I also started to realize here, through the things we're talking about, that, well, yeah, but mastery is repetition, is practice. It's diligence, it's learning your craft. Just yesterday, I was illustrating to someone. I was saying, haven't you ever seen those little gymnastic girls do their thing at the Olympics? And they do this, 1.5 minute routine. Well, did you know that they have practiced that more than 10 times? More than 100 times? More than 1,000 times? They've been working on that routine for 4 years every day, 8 hours a day. And I used to think of that and go, okay, I'm getting it now.
Yeah, well, and as a teacher, that you're kind of like the Russian coach or something going, no, let's do it again, let's do it again.
I saw an article on someplace online just recently, and they were talking, it was a picture of Mick Goodrick, who's an outstanding musician and teacher. And somebody was talking about, I was at Berkeley in the days when Mick was still there, and he was kind of this controversial recluse guy walking on, everybody was afraid of him. And, and I kind of wanted to take lessons from him, but his rep was, he was just too serious of a teacher. And I read that and I thought, oh my God, buddy, you missed a boat.
Yeah, not a serious enough student to appreciate it.
There's no such thing as too serious. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go out and drink a beer, that's one thing. Yeah. But if you're going to learn to master your instrument, too serious of a teacher. And I'm sure any reputation I had was that times 10. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Well, and the results that you see from students are there. Now, how has that process been for you over the years, seeing students develop and seeing pretty much, since I've known you, everybody that does the stuff that you suggest gets better. It's 100%.
Without exception.
And so has that always been, were you already, when you started teaching at that point, after having all these teachers, was that already in place, or did that develop over
No, that was already
years?
In place. I understood that by what I had done, because I didn't learn to play well quickly either, but I learned to play well because I repeated things and I paid attention and I worked hard. And I simply, for years, just had students go through exactly the same steps I went through. And then I started being able to analyze what they needed and what their strengths and weaknesses even better, and I could have them go through processes which got them where I went, but even faster. I've had, in the last 20 years, I've had many students accomplish in 5 years what it took me 15 years to do. So simply because I've already walked the walk.
Yeah.
I often tell people, if you're going to walk through a minefield, all these explosives, well, wouldn't you want to walk in somebody's footsteps? Well, you can go run off and do what you want, but if you want to just walk in these footsteps, they're already there. So, yeah, that was already in place. And it's been proven time and time again. I've had many, many students who learned to play extremely well. Some of them famous, rich and famous. More of them not. But anybody who simply does the practice learns to play well.
Yeah, well, I've certainly seen it in our time together and all the teaching that we've done together and the amazing results that happen from that. What about when I know you've done, stuff all over the world teaching. How has that been different in different countries? Like when you go to Brazil or Austria, or is there any difference in terms of how the students are? Or
totally different, and it has nothing to do with the actual music. It has to do with societally how the upbringing is, the amount of discipline that the society expects out of students, kids, adults at different ages, the influences that they have, not just musically again, but sort of their thinking influences. It's drastically different every place I've been. Japan, or as you mentioned, Brazil, or bunches of other places. Yeah, it's just because of the society. It's very different. As with today, the students who show up at a place like Berkeley College at 19 years old or 18 years old, they're drastically different people than they were 20 years ago. Meaning when someone showed up at Berkeley 20 years ago at 18. Society has changed, and so their thinking has, and their strengths and weaknesses have, and just how they interact with the teacher and what they expect and don't expect. Sure, it's changed drastically.
So but the way that you have to learn hasn't changed.
No, never.
And that's the problem. If you can't, you have to do it.
That's correct.
Everybody.
Yeah, there's no fast way. There's no easier way. You can play the bass like this if you want, but it's probably not going to be the most efficient. And I was sort of being sarcastic there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, what one wants to do is fine. But what the student needs, what the teacher wants the student, and what the student can actually handle. Well, today, the priority is what the student wants.
Yeah.
Rob, I had a guy 2 days ago criticize one of my real bass lesson videos. And he criticized me because a couple of people in the comments asked and said, I don't understand this. Can you supply the tab? And another guy says, Jim, I just can't see it very well. can't you give us a notation? And I said, it's a video with audio. Use your eyes, your ears, and do it over and over and over and over. So this guy came on and criticized, and his basic line was, man, how do you think you're ever going to be a better teacher if you don't listen to your students?
Oh, wow.
Well, the student, by definition, is someone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
And did you know that it's one of the hardest things in the world to teach somebody something they think they already know? So, yeah, that's just a difference of a, modern-day societal approach of, well, man, I want to be the teacher. I want to tell you what I want. Well, not for me. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and everything that you described about your process, you didn't know what fingerings needed to happen, or
No.
or even early on, like what
That's right.
is that the A major or minor? What
Exactly.
those are things that you need direction on. So it's to have a student qualified to know, oh, this is the teaching I need. Well, then you don't even need a teacher, I guess.
Correct. I've often said that to people. Sounds to me like you've already got the answers.
Yeah. Now, where do you think that as musicians, I know you've suggested that musicians should teach, that musicians should be teaching the material
Sure,
that they learn. Where do you think that fits into the whole thing?
Well, I think
people
when you
learning?
teach someone something, you start to recognize challenges that they have. And you start to recognize challenges that maybe you have or didn't have. And it gives you perspective. I have such great perspective today because I've been paying attention for over 50 years, teaching students and paying close attention to what's hard for them, what's easy for them, what works for them, what I've done that works better than others. So yeah, that's perspective.
So it definitely brings a lot of that.
Of course.
That's great. A little bit off topic of what we're doing, I wanted to ask you about all these books that you've been doing this last, I don't know, couple years or so. It's just...
Let's take a break. I want to get a little drink of my tea, then we'll start again, okay? Thanks.